So here's a few things that I have found over the years with having social media being part of my job, because as a content marketer, you need to have social to understand who your audience is, what they care about, to engage with them, to promote your content. Social needs to be a really robust part of what you're doing. And I've worked with so many leaders who think, well, of course our employees understand that we want them to be sharing and liking and commenting on our content. We have all this great content. They should definitely be saying to customers, hey, here's this great article that talks about this issue you're having, or here's a case study that can really help you figure out this problem you're having. That seems really obvious, right? And of course you think, well, marketing is everyone's job. Here's the thing though, employees don't actually all intrinsically know this. 77% of employees don't feel encouraged to share company news on social media. And that's something I knew intrinsically, and I was so excited when Bamboo by Sprout actually did their research to find this. They basically are worried because they've seen things on Facebook where people have been fired for sharing something on social media or for saying something about themselves, sharing it on social media. So people are actually not feeling like, hey, this is a good idea. Instead, they're afraid. So how do we actually let employees know? How do we let them know that we want them to do it? Well, as my friend Martin Lieberman would say, duh, you tell them, right? You just tell them. That's obvious, isn't it? Well, it's not so obvious because frequently you end up with executives who say, oh gosh, but we don't need social media guidelines. They already know. They know we want them to share. And our employees don't want us to tell them what to do on social media on their own time. People are going to get mad if we tell them what we can or can't do. Or worse yet, your leaders can't agree on a policy. And the really funny thing is I had all 3 of these objections at one of the startups I worked at. All 3 of them. The problem is, it wasn't that they were okay with whatever people wanted to share. Instead, we actually had a CEO who would, in an open plan office, walk over to someone and say, you know what, you tweeted that article this morning? I don't like how they included our competitor. You need to delete that tweet. And he would do that in front of the entire company. So guess what happened? People stopped sharing any company news on social media because do you want to be the person who has the CEO come over and tell you, hey, you need to take that down right now in front of everybody? I sure didn't, right? So the reason though that all these things happen is people think, well, we don't need social media guidelines because people know what to do and these guidelines are all about what not to do. It's going to make people mad. And it's also about, oh, well, we don't want them to feel like we're telling them they have to do things outside of work. Social media doesn't happen outside of work, okay? Anybody who thinks that your employees are engaging in social media outside of work, you need to look around. They're on it all the time. They are on it in your boring meetings. They are on it at lunch. They're on it constantly. So these are 2 wrong assumptions that you really have to work with your leaders to help them understand, hey, social media guidelines are not this horrible thing that are just bossing employees around and telling them what to do. They can actually be really awesome ways to tell people that you do want them to engage on social, and they kind of give them some guardrails so they feel more comfortable. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to start with what to include in your guidelines. I'm going to give you some examples of some pretty good guidelines that you can use as models or as examples to show your executives, hey, this is what other companies are doing. And then we'll briefly go through how to roll out the guidelines. All right. So before we actually talk about what to include in your social media guidelines, I'm going to give you another terrible example. Because I find that that's always like a good way to start. I previously worked at a Fortune 500 financial services company that was based in San Francisco. And we were going to roll out brand new social media guidelines. It was something that was being written by our legal department, as frequently happens in a large company. But here's the thing, as I mentioned before, I'm a gamer. I wasn't just a gamer though, I also was the host of a podcast. I had a blog. I was very active in all sorts of gaming forums. So probably out of our team, I was the person most active on social. So they said, hey, Erika, you should be part of the team that's going to be drafting these guidelines. And I said, oh, well, yeah, sign me right up. I cannot wait. So anybody who knows me is not going to be surprised about this next part. I made sure to make enough amendments and ask enough questions that I would learn how to subvert those social media guidelines, because I had no intention of following them, right? And so what ended up happening is I worked on them, and at the end I was pretty sure I knew how I could get around them. So I sent an email to the lawyer who's the primary drafter, and I said, so let me be clear, with our guidelines, you can get around them if nowhere publicly do you say you work for the company. And you know what the lawyer said in writing, in an email that I printed out and had up in my queue? You're totally right, Erika. So what happened? I went to LinkedIn and I took out my company name. I made sure to never mention my company at all on social media. I did not share any of their articles. And people, of course, asked me, they said, Erika, are you changing jobs? Did you just quit your job? What happened? And I said, well, we got these really onerous social media guidelines, so I just stopped saying where I work. That actually had obviously a chilling effect, because people who had thought, you work at this great company, it's has all these fantastic benefits. They said, oh gosh, you don't even want to say publicly where you work? That's pretty bad, right? Usually that's left for the kinds of industries that people work in and don't want to tell anyone. So it ended up being a real loss for them, and it caused, their social media guidelines were that kind of a detriment that caused a lot of people to do the exact same thing. We probably had half of our marketing team do that. So 100-something person marketing team, they all went in and took the company name off of their LinkedIn profiles. And no, I was not fired for leading that revolution, which I'm still kind of surprised. But the point is you can have a lot of really unintended negative aspects if you're approaching social media guidelines as what not to do. So, that said, the first place you need to start off, and this is something that Zappos does really well, is you need to define what employee advocacy means for your company. At Zappos, they really want people to kind of have that joy and see that the idea of working at Zappos, regardless of what you do, that it's like this fun place, that it has a lot of camaraderie, that it's not just some boring retail shipping kind of a job. It's fantastic. And so they have all of these great examples, and everyone is clear that if you work at Zappos, you're expected, basically, as long as you love it, to be sharing. They have all sorts of fun hashtags. All sorts of fun hashtags, all sorts of regular programs where they're sharing employee-created content. Next, some of you will recognize this. It's kind of a version of Jenny Dietrich's PESO model. I like to use this when you're trying to talk to your leaders about why is your brand even on social, right? Because there are brands that are on social in order to build community. There are brands that are on social because they think it's a fantastic distribution channel. What is the reason that the brand is on social? You need to tell your employees that, so that way then they understand how they can help. If you're not using social as a means to recruit people, you don't really want your employees to be sharing a bunch of, hey, we're all hanging out drinking beer kinds of photos, because that's going to undermine your efforts, right? But don't frame it negatively. Instead, explain to them why your brand is on social and what you're trying to achieve so that they can actually be part of achieving those goals. Next, provide brand content samples. So I love this. I'm more of a cat person, but I thought this was really adorable. This is a dog person culture. And they have, their special hashtags that they use, and they share with employees. This is the kind of employee-generated content that we're going to reshare. So when you actually amplify employee-created content, that says, we want more of this. We're recognizing these folks for going out there and doing these things that align with our values. Now, this example is actually from something I put together. When I was putting together an employee advocacy program and social media training, we literally had slides in our deck going through what should you do on LinkedIn? What should you do on Twitter? How many of you have actually seen something like that? How many of you work someplace where you've seen examples of what your employer wants? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So how do you know what it is that your employers actually would like you to do? again, you've got to actually show people and be very direct about it. Okay, now I know I said that this is mostly about encouraging people to participate. You also have to encourage people to not participate in a way that's going to be bad for them and the brand. Have you ever walked into a store and you need some help, and the person who should be on the floor greeting people, helping people, is standing there with their phone, looking at Facebook or whatever, and you can't even get their attention? That's happened, right? Probably they don't have any kind of guidelines in place that say, hey guys, you're welcome to use social when you're on your break or when you're in the back, but please don't have your phone out and be using it when you're trying to be available to customers. This was a fun example that was from this past week. So I love TrackMaven. TrackMaven has been here at the show. They're an amazing platform. I love them to pieces. So does Kathy McPhillips. Everyone loves TrackMaven. Their brand is the kind of brand that says, we love you too. They're like that kind of give you a virtual hug, send you some corgis, all right? Compare that with something else that happened this week, where we had a brand that jumped in and was saying, hey, you're having a problem? You're having a problem with your product? We offer that for cheaper. And what kind of a response did they get? They got a response telling them they were douchey. Do you want that to happen to you? I mean, maybe if that's your brand, your brand is really in your face and you're okay with getting those kinds of replies, all right, fantastic. But the point is, how are you wanting your customers to be treated by your employees on social? Do you want an overzealous employee to jump in, to jump in and actually offer, hey, here's something we can do for you? Or do you want them to just be sharing customer love? What kind of brand are you, and how do you want your employees to be, to be reinforcing that? And then finally, again, don't assume that everybody in your organization even understands the basics when it comes to social, or that they're going to ask you. I actually worked with my social media manager to put together employee resources. We did written resources and videos that did things like how to customize your LinkedIn URL. So that way it wasn't, LinkedIn / a bunch of weird characters. That was just people's names. We also encourage people to embed content that they created on their profile. A lot of folks don't know, are you allowed to put something you made at work on your profile? We told people, of course. If you write a case study, if you do a training video, if you create some sort of really amazing content, we want you to share it on LinkedIn. And here we're actually going to show you how to do it. So that way we made it incredibly clear to people what the expectation was. All right, now we're going to get into some real life examples. And it's not going to just be a bunch of startups. It's going to be companies that you can show your employers, you can show your boss, hey, it's not just a bunch of silly companies. This is Dell's social media policy. And again, all this stuff is going to be in the slides that you can download, so you'll have these URLs, so you can actually use these examples for yourself when you get back into the office, because I think that's always so important. So what I love about this is not the wall of text that's kind of hard to scan through. What I love about this is this little call-out box, all right? They break down what their social media guidelines are into 5 things that normal people can actually remember, all right? It's not this huge multi-page legal document that you probably need to have a lawyer take a look at. You need to be responsible, protect information, disclose that you work for Dell, so don't hype it up without saying you're a Dell employee, be responsible, and be nice. You think to yourself, be nice, well that's obvious, right? It is not obvious. The internet is full of people being not nice all the time, and some of them might have your company your company tag right there. So you do unfortunately have to tell people to be nice. Now, this is kind of an eye chart, okay? You're not gonna be able to read all of this until you actually go to the page. So I'm not saying to lay this out, please do not use Comic Sans, please do not use this weak font. But again, they have a really nice 5-point bullet list to help their employees understand what the expectations are for their behavior on social. And it has something here, though, that is a big sticking point that I'd like to get everyone here to kind of give me your take on. My friend Martin Lieberman, again, he always has an issue with people having in their Twitter bios The views here represent, my own views and not my employer. He hates that. He thinks it's the most stupid thing ever. However, almost every big company has that as one of the portions of their policy. And the reason is they don't want to end up being sued or being liable for something their employees say. It's kind of lame, but it's the kind of thing that if you include it in your social media policies, it might be what it takes to get legal to actually sign off on you letting your employees be more active. So it's something to think about. Again, I hate it too. I think it's lame. But it can have its place in a culture where people are really risk adverse, where they are concerned that they're going to have some sort of legal ramifications, and where the alternative is that they say nobody can use social. Nobody can say that they're an employee and use social unless they're part of the comms team. So it's something to think about.